Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into something pretty massive.
Yeah.
The Change Healthcare Cyberattack.
It's huge.
This isn't, like a little data breach.
Oh.
We're talking about possibly the biggest one ever in healthcare history.
Oh, yeah.
Affecting something like 100 million people.
100 million people is just a mind-boggling number. And I think what makes this even more disturbing is the fact that Change Healthcare is one of these companies that most people haven't heard of, but plays a critical role.
Right, behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah.
Okay, so who is Change Healthcare?
Yeah.
And why is this breach such a big deal?
So think of Change Healthcare as kind of like the central nervous system
Right.
for all of US healthcare.
Really?
So they're this massive clearinghouse,
Okay.
which basically means they're a middleman between healthcare providers. So that's your doctors, your hospitals, insurance companies, pharmacies, and even those prescription discount services that you might use.
So they're handling like all of our, medical records and insurance and...
Exactly. They're dealing with extremely sensitive information.
Wow.
Medical records, insurance, details, financial data.
Oh my God.
And they process something like 15 billion transactions every year, touching a third of all U.S. patient records.
That is unbelievable.
It is, and they actually hold HITRS certification, which is considered like the gold standard for data security in healthcare.
Okay, so they had this like top-notch security certification and they still got hacked.
They did.
That's alarming.
It is, and it really raises some serious questions about how effective current cybersecurity practices are in the healthcare industry.
Yeah.
What makes this even more concerning is that Change Healthcare is owned by United Health Group, which is one of the biggest healthcare conglomerates in the country.
So the company that owns this system that got hacked also owns like a bunch of other healthcare companies.
Exactly. So United Health Group also owns Optum, which is involved in data analytics.
Physician practices, and they even offer loans to healthcare providers.
Hold on. So the same company that owns the system that got hacked also owns a company that lends money to the providers who are now struggling because of the hack.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's a structure that's known as vertical integration.
Okay.
And it's starting to raise some concerns about potential conflicts of interest.
I can see why.
Yeah. Critics are starting to question whether United Health Group might be able to kind of leverage this situation to their advantage.
Oh, that's a good point. We'll have to come back to that.
Yeah.
But first, let's rewind back to February 21st, 2024, when this whole breach came to light.
Right.
What happened?
So it all started with this sudden outage. Change. Healthcare just went offline.
Wow.
And systems all across the healthcare industry started experiencing major disruptions.
Really?
Yeah. Hospitals they couldn't verify. Patient insurance pharmacies couldn't process prescriptions.
Oh, my God.
And the whole system just seemed to grind to a halt. So this wasn't just like a technical glitch or something.
No, it wasn't a technical glitch.
Okay.
Pretty soon after the ransomware gang, Black Hat came forward and claimed responsibility for the attack.
Oh, wow.
They were boasting about stealing a massive amount of data. 6 terabytes.
6 terabytes of data.
6 terabytes of data.
Wow, what is that like? Is that a lot?
To put that in perspective, 6 terabytes is enough to hold the entire Library of Congress several times over.
That's an insane amount of data.
And they demanded a hefty ransom, obviously.
Of course. So what kind of information did they actually get their hands on?
We're talking sensitive patient information.
Okay.
Medical records, insurance details, financial data. The kind of information that, in the wrong hands, could be used for identity theft, fraud, or even blackmail.
That's terrifying.
It is.
So even though United Health Group paid the ransom, that data could still be out there.
That's the really scary part. So they paid a whopping $22 million.
What?
In Bitcoin.
Oh my God.
But even the CEO of United Health Group himself admitted that they couldn't guarantee that Black Cat didn't make copies of the data before handing it back.
Oh my gosh, that is like a nightmare scenario for anyone whose information was caught up in this.
It is a complete nightmare.
So this breach has had just like a ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
Across the entire healthcare system.
Absolutely.
I've heard stories of doctors having to take out payday loans.
Yeah.
Just to keep their practices afloat because they can't process claims.
Exactly.
And patients facing delays in getting prescriptions filled.
Yeah.
And treatments approved.
It's been chaos.
It's heartbreaking.
It is.
So this is clearly like a massive issue.
Oh, yeah.
And one that the government, can't ignore.
They can't.
What steps are they taking to address this breach and try to, prevent something like this from happening again?
So the Office for Civil Rights, or OCR, which is responsible for enforcing HIPAA, they've launched an investigation into Change Healthcare and United Health Group's compliance with data security regulations.
Okay.
Now, this is not just like a routine audit. It's a targeted investigation, which shows how serious this is.
So they have the power to impose like significant penalties if they find wrongdoing.
Absolutely. They could issue hefty fines or even revoke Change Healthcare's ability to handle patient data altogether.
Wow.
And this investigation isn't happening in a vacuum.
Right.
Senators have been grilling the CEO of United Health Group about the lack of basic security measures like multi-factor authentication.
Oh, yeah. Multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
So that's where you need to enter a code from your phone or email.
Yes.
In addition to your password.
Exactly.
That seems like a pretty standard security measure these days.
It is a very standard security measure, and its absence in a system as critical as Change Healthcare is mind-boggling.
Yeah, I can see that.
So the senators were also questioning why a system this important didn't have robust redundancy and backup plans. Essentially, they're asking, why was the system responsible for handling such sensitive information, seemingly so unprepared for a cyber attack?
Yeah, it's a really valid question, especially considering they had that HEALTHCARE US certification.
Right.
Which is supposed to be like the gold standard for data security in healthcare.
Exactly.
This whole situation just raises so many questions about how we secure our healthcare data in a world that's becoming more and more digital.
It's a huge issue.
It really is.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a wake-up call for the whole industry.
Makes you wonder if maybe there's a false sense of security that comes with these certifications. Like if a company checks all the boxes and gets, the stamp of approval, they might just assume they're invincible.
I think that's possible. And there's also the issue of legacy systems. A lot of healthcare organizations are relying on outdated technology that just wasn't designed with these modern cyber threats in mind.
So even if they have some security measures in place, they might not be enough to withstand like a really sophisticated attack like the one that Black Hat launched.
Yep. Exactly. And that's where those basic security measures that we talked about, like multi-factor authentication, become even more important.
Right.
Adding that extra layer of verification can really reduce the risk of unauthorized access, even if passwords are compromised.
So it's not just about having like a complex password, it's about having multiple layers of defense.
Exactly.
Got it.
And it's not just about technology either. It's also about creating a culture of security awareness within healthcare organizations.
What do you mean by that?
Well, employees at all levels need to be trained to recognize phishing attempts and other social engineering tactics that hackers use to gain access to sensitive information.
Right, because even the most sophisticated security system can be bypassed if someone clicks on a malicious link or falls for a scam.
Absolutely. Cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, and it requires vigilance at all levels.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So speaking of responsibility, let's go back to United Health Group for a second.
Okay.
And that whole vertical integration issue that you mentioned before.
Yeah.
So they own Optum, which is a company that lends money to healthcare providers.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, considering the financial strain that this breach has put on providers, isn't there like a potential conflict of interest there?
It's definitely raising some eyebrows.
Yeah.
Critics are arguing that this situation could create an unfair advantage for Optum.
How so?
So imagine this. You've got providers who are struggling to stay afloat because of the Change Healthcare breach, right?
Right.
And then suddenly here comes Optum, owned by the same parent company, offering loans to help them weather the storm.
It seems a little predatory, like they're profiting from the chaos that they helped create.
That's a strong accusation, and United Health Group has pushed back against those claims.
Of course.
They maintain that Optum is simply trying to help providers in need.
Okay.
And that there's no intention to exploit the situation.
But the optics aren't great, are they?
No, not really. It's hard not to see this as a potential conflict of interest.
Right.
Especially given the scale of this breach and the impact it's had on the healthcare system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the breach, the fallout, the potential conflicts of interest, and the urgent need for better cybersecurity in healthcare.
Right.
But what can individuals do to protect themselves? I mean, it feels like we're kind of at the mercy of these companies and their security practices.
Yeah, you're right. We are to a certain extent, but there are steps that individuals can take to mitigate their risk.
Okay, like what?
First and foremost, check if you've been impacted by the breach.
Okay.
Change Healthcare has a dedicated website and a hotline where you can find information and resources, including free credit monitoring and identity theft protection services.
Okay, those are good starting points. But what about beyond that? Are there any like proactive measures that people can take to safeguard their data?
Absolutely. This breach really underscores how important it is to be vigilant about our personal information.
Yeah.
Make it a habit to regularly check your credit reports for any suspicious activity.
Okay.
You can actually get a free report from each of the 3 major credit bureaus annually.
That's a good reminder.
Yeah.
It's also probably a good idea to be extra cautious about phishing attempts, especially ones that might exploit this breach.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Hackers often use events like this to trick people into giving up their sensitive information.
Exactly. So don't click on any suspicious links or open any unexpected attachments, even if they appear to be from a legitimate source like Change Healthcare or United Health Group.
Okay.
Always verify the sender's address and be wary of any unsolicited requests for personal information.
Got it.
Yeah. And of course, using strong, unique passwords for all your online accounts is crucial.
Right.
A password manager can be a real lifesaver here. It generates and stores complex passwords for you so you don't have to remember them all.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. And enable 2-factor authentication whenever possible.
Right.
It might seem like a small step, but it adds that extra layer of security that can make a big difference in protecting your accounts.
Yeah, it's like locking your front door and then adding a deadbolt for good measure.
Exactly.
It might not be foolproof, but it makes it a lot harder for someone to break in.
Exactly. And this brings us to a larger point.
Oh, cool.
Well, we can and should take individual steps to protect our data.
Yeah.
This breach really highlights the need for systemic change in healthcare cybersecurity.
So it's not just about what we can do as individuals, it's about holding these companies accountable.
Yes.
And demanding better security practices across the board.
Exactly. We need a more proactive and comprehensive approach to data security in healthcare, one that goes beyond just checking boxes and getting certifications.
Right, because clearly that HITRE certification alone wasn't enough to prevent this breach from happening.
It wasn't.
So what does a more robust approach to cybersecurity look like? What needs to change?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
How do we move beyond these reactive measures and create a healthcare system that truly prioritizes data security?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that cybersecurity is not just an IT issue.
Okay.
It's a business issue, it's a patient safety issue, and ultimately it's a public health issue.
So we need a more holistic approach.
That involves everyone from healthcare executives to frontline staff to patients themselves.
Exactly. And that involves a multi-pronged strategy.
Okay.
First, we need to see a significant investment in modernizing healthcare IT infrastructure.
Okay.
A lot of organizations are still relying on these outdated systems
Right.
that are just vulnerable to attack.
Yeah, it's like trying to protect a medieval castle with a moat and a drawbridge when the enemy has cannons and gunpowder.
Exactly. We need to equip healthcare organizations with the tools and technologies they need to defend against these sophisticated cyber threats. And that includes implementing those basic security measures we talked about, like multi-factor authentication and strong password policies.
It's kind of embarrassing that those things are still considered basic when they're so crucial for protecting sensitive information.
It is. And beyond the technology, we need to see a greater emphasis on education and training.
Okay.
Employees at all levels need to understand the importance of cybersecurity and be equipped to recognize and respond to potential threats.
So it's about creating a culture of security awareness
Yes.
where everyone feels empowered to be part of the solution.
Exactly. And this also involves fostering greater transparency and accountability.
Okay.
Patients have a right to know how their data is being protected, and healthcare organizations need to be held responsible for implementing robust security measures.
Yeah, this breach has really shaken people's trust in the healthcare system.
It has.
Rebuilding that trust requires not just words, but actions.
I completely agree. And it's not just about protecting against cyber attacks either. It's also about ensuring that patient data is being used responsibly and ethically.
Right.
The fact that United Health Group owns both Change Healthcare and Optum raises some serious questions about potential conflicts of interest and the concentration of power in the healthcare industry.
It feels like a slippery slope. If a single company can control so much of the healthcare ecosystem, from data processing to financial services, doesn't that create opportunities for exploitation?
It's a valid concern, and it's one that lawmakers and regulators are starting to grapple with.
This breach has put a spotlight on the need for greater scrutiny of these large healthcare conglomerates and their business practices.
Yeah, it's a wake-up call for all of us, not just the healthcare industry.
I agree.
In an increasingly digital world, data security is everyone's responsibility.
It is.
We need to be informed, proactive, and demand better from the organizations that hold our sensitive information.
Will said, this breach isn't just a healthcare issue, it's a societal issue. It's a reminder that in the digital age, our data is both incredibly valuable and incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's up to all of us to demand better protection for this vital information.
This has been a fascinating, albeit unsettling deep dive.
It has.
It's clear that the Change Healthcare breach has exposed some serious vulnerabilities in our healthcare system, but it's also sparked a much-needed conversation about cybersecurity, data privacy, and the future of healthcare in a digital world.
It has indeed, and I believe that from this crisis, we can emerge with a stronger, more secure, and more resilient healthcare system.
But it will require a collective effort from all stakeholders.
It's a challenge we can't afford to ignore. Most dream. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thank you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay vigilant.